Well, this is going to be the unscripted version of the scripted version at 11 if you're here. I always write copious notes, and then you should have the faith just to go with it. I remember once losing my sermon, or at least not losing it, not taking it with me, and somebody said to me, you should do that more often. Just lose it, and just get on with it when you do it. Before I read the scripture, our theme today is grace, and I brought this big book with me. This is a book called the Primitive Methodist Hymnal. Primitive Methodist Hymnal. Some of you who know Methodist history will know that at one time there were many divisions, or shouldn't say divisions, but bits and pieces of Methodism. From the Wesleyan, the Primitive Methodist, United Methodist, was it Methodist Connection? Something like that. There are all sorts of brands, including the Primitive Methodist Hymnal, the Primitive Methodist. Very, very strong in the north. Down here in this way, partly because it came from Devon and parts of Cornwall, we had the Bible Christians. And one of the great songs, in days gone by, Methodists used to march and sing through the streets. And one of the great songs was Hark the Gospel News is Sounding. I don't know if you know that song. It's a great marching song. It went, hark the gospel news is sounding, Christ has suffered on the tree. Streams of mercy are abounding, grace to all who grace to all who risk and love. Now poor sinner, look to him who died for you. Look to him who died for you. They went through the streets, great processions, singing. That was the great clarion cry, the national anthem of the Primitive Methodist Church. And hearing just now when Mark was talking about Jesus is Lord, I keep thinking when I was living in California, we had a great shout there. It was, give me a J. Give me an E, give me an S, give me a U, give me an S. What does that say? What does it say? Give me a J, give me an E, give me an S, give me a U, give me an S. What does that spell? We used to march through the streets in Berkeley, in California, and all the upheaval in the end of the 60s and all the drug cults and everything was there in Berkeley, in California. And as Christians, as people of the People's Church, it was called, in Parker Street, just a big, large room. People used to bring their dogs and everything else, and cats, and sit on the floor and squat and everything else. That's why you did it in those days. And we used to recall some of the great things of some of the great people of the faith, and the faith itself, and then we would go into that great clarion cry as we marched through the door. Give me a J, give me an E, give me an S, give me a U, give me an S. What does that spell? Jesus. Well, I won't do this at 11 o'clock because it's much more formal at 11. Anyway, no, I'm just joking. Well, I must confess, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, no one would stand in front of this church and do something like that. It was terribly formal with your suits and collars and ties. The school used to come down and assemble, and it was all very, very respectful. But I'm sure there was lots of faith. Now, I have to pause, I think. Is that right, Frank, for the moment? Okay. Oh, my goodness. I spent the whole week actually getting ready for the camera. I've done my jogging and running and getting my hair done and all that kind of thing. It's just a horror, isn't it? Horror to be seen by people and probably set them back months in their life. This is a wonderful passage, though, today in the Gospel, in the lectionary. Matthew 20. This is one of the great stories of Jesus. The kingdom of heaven, he said, is like a man that is a householder who went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. There was the practice in the time of Jesus, as it was indeed in many parts of our country in years gone by, that people used to gather outside the shipyards and other places to be called, to work. The person who owned the place or ran the place would decide how many people were needed, and they used to line up and used to be called. It's not a very good way of living, but that's the way it was. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, a lot more, of course, in those days than our penny, he sent them into the vineyard. Excuse me. And he went out and about the third hour and saw others standing in the marketplace, idle. And to them he said, "Go also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you." And they went their way. And again he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour, did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing. And he saith unto them, "Why stand ye all the day idle?" They say unto him, "Because no man hath hired us." He said unto them, "Go ye also into the vineyard." And when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto the steward, "Call the labourers, and pay them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first." And when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. And when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more. And they likewise received every man a penny. And when they received it, they murmured against the householder, saying, "These last have spent but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he answered and said to one of them, "Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst thou agree with me for a penny? Take up that which is thine and go thy way. It is my will to give unto this last, even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Or is thine eye evil, because I am good? So the last shall be first, and the first last." Now, the great thing, I think, about the teaching of Jesus is he has this kind of knack when he tells stories of separating people into groups almost, those for what he's saying and those against, and those who are puzzled by what he says. Now, this is a story, if you took this to Morrison's or Tesco or Sainsbury's, since I'm better knowledge of the others, Lidl, Co-op and all the rest, give everybody a name check in case somebody's here from there this morning. If you took this story into the boardroom and talked about hiring people, this story just does not add up. You're paying so much money to the first person you hire, according to the story, and then everybody you hire at different parts of the day because you need, maybe, people to do particular things, more than you thought, which is maybe one reason why he kept hiring people during the day, paying them the same money. Now, it's like you say going into Sainsbury's, and you're saying, "I'd like to work for you this morning." And he says, "Yeah, fine, we can have you stacking the aisles," or whatever the case may be, and don't get in the way of anybody if you see anybody, if there's anybody. And you're doing it from 9 to 5. I'm going to pay you X amount of money. You're going to be paid today, I'm going to pay you for the whole day, £40. And you say, that's fine. That's what happened at the beginning of the story. He chose a certain number of people, the owner, to work and to do things. And he says to him, "This is what you're going to have. This is the money I'm going to pay you. Is that okay?" And they say yes. Because everybody needs money to live. They've maybe got families. They've got to buy things and, provide for the family. So that's okay. And then there's another group of you who are going to be hired a couple of hours later, and he says, "I'm going to pay you £40. Yeah. That's very nice, isn't it? You started a bit late in the day, you're going to get the same money as very nice indeed. Another lot come a bit later, and he says, "I'm going to pay you £40. Oh, wow. You can't imagine that happening, can you, in labour terms? If your employment and your money is being offered to you, you would naturally expect less money. Though I'm sure if you're offered the same money, you're not going to turn it down. You're going to be very happy. Well, that's all hunky-dory. Everybody's going to be working. People need work. Provision is made. You've got a job. You're no longer standing in the line. You're no longer waiting. Some days you get nothing. You hope that some days you will get something. So, here you all are. You can imagine you working along the shelves, or every now and then there's an announcement for Mr. Jasper, please go to, as you keep hearing that announcement as they seem to open another till. When the queues are almost stretching to the back of the store, they decide to open another one, sort of thing. And you're talking with your friends and your mates who are all working there, And you can imagine, the first people saying to the second or third, so what are you getting then? Oh, he says, I'm getting £40. Oh, well, I'm getting £40. I was here before you. And you can imagine going along there, I'll say to the other third, how much are you getting? He says, £40. But he said he's paying me £40. I was here first thing. I've been working many more hours than you in this scorching heat in the vineyard. And you are getting the same money as me. Well, there are some young people here this morning. Those of us who are older will recall a time when Britain seemed to be on strike all the time. And when Britain was on strike, it was always inevitably about wages and money and true deserts. And still, of course, that's a bone of contention between those who work in particular areas. They see maybe profits being made. They see the owners perhaps living in luxury. And they think they should get more of the cake. And so they ask and they demand. Well, of course, sometimes there are all kinds of reasons given as to why your wages shouldn't increase, even though the owner seems to be doing better and better, or the company seems to be doing better and better, because the company always says we've got to have money to invest, to expand, so we can't afford to pay you any more. See, rich people are always interesting. I worked for a time in a record magazine, in offices in Carnaby Street. And we had a number of desks. And the American owner, Mr. Nassiter, used to go around inspecting our waste paper bins, seeing how much wasted paper was in the bins. And he would say, Mr. Jasper, I can count 26 pieces of paper there. If you keep doing that every day, that's a ream a week, and that is £4.50. But where was Mr. Nassiter at lunchtime? Mr. Nassiter was at the Ivy, spending a vast amount of money on a luxurious lunch. See this dichotomy all the time. But this is an extraordinary story. It's obviously not a story about labour relations. Otherwise there'd be pandemonium. How many of us would want to work for the same money but doing more hours than other people? And yet Jesus is seemingly saying to us, that's what it's all about. So what is Jesus on about in this story? What is he trying to tell us? Well, this story is in the lectionary from which this lesson comes today. There have been a series of lessons recently, taking us up to harvest and so on, about the generosity and the boundless love of God that is there offered to you, for you to take, for you to receive. And it doesn't have anything to do with what you think you are. It doesn't have anything to do with all the qualifications you think you may have. It's nothing to do with you saying, well, I've been a steward in church here for about 22 years. And other people have just joined. And somehow they seem to be getting the same praise as me. But I've been here 22 years. And I deserve the greater love of God. It's got nothing to do with that at all, which is what the story is trying to tell us. That God's love isn't conditional on what you, in a sense, put into it. God's love doesn't change, doesn't alter because you've worked 3 hours, 6 hours, or 9 hours, or 12 hours. The same love is offered to you, whoever you are. The same sacrifice of Christ is there for you, irrespective. It isn't about who you are, what you think you can come forward by saying. That's one element in the story. The other side, of course, is the more practical side. That in a sense Jesus is saying, look to the people then, you were looking for work. You agreed in the first place to do what you were asked to do. You agreed to do it for a price. So what are you complaining about? What are you complaining about? You agreed to do it for what I offered you. So go and do it. Why are you complaining? It doesn't matter what other people who are booked later in the day, what I offered them is what I offered them. And they accepted it. What's that got to do with you? You were offered money. You were glad to get the money. You were glad to do the work. You accepted it. You were chosen. And it just so happened, if you like, in a sense, that during the day I had to find other people to come forward and do work for me. But my love and my generosity to them was the same. Why? Why? Because there's a common need amongst everybody who is going to be employed. There's a common need amongst anybody, all of us who have to find money to live, to feed, and to care, and to cope for ourselves. And in those days when labor and work was scarce, rejoice. Rejoice in the fact that you were given work. Rejoice in the fact that you were offered money you need, and you accept it. But rejoice also that in my generosity as the owner, however hard it may be for you to accept it, in my generosity, I felt that the people I hired at the 6th or the 9th or the 12th hour, whatever the case may be, I felt their need was just as great. And I'm happy from my bounty, from my goodness, from what I have, from my generosity. I didn't really want to pay you less. I didn't want to give you a small proportion, even though I know you've not worked the full day. You've only worked some part of the day. You've only worked so many hours. You haven't done so many hours as some of the others. And you certainly ought to be thankful, and you certainly ought to be grateful for the fact that you have work, and I've given you work, and I've given you sustenance. And that sense is a parable that Jesus, in a way, is telling those people of his time and us of all time. Be grateful for what comes to you when it comes to you. Be grateful for what you have, accept what you have, and if so by chance you're actually doing something more than some other people, well, so this isn't a labor relations exercise here. This isn't a great pay structure being put here. It's all about us as human beings. It's about our generosity. It's about our love. Grace is this old word which I mentioned. They used to say years ago, as I look at a piece of paper now, I say here it was a word once liberally used. It features in many hymns of years ago. They used to sing, grace is like a flowing like a river, something uncontrolled that surges and races away. People sang of the grace of God. People said that grace was sufficient. It made us grateful. It made us feel there was something that we could have that didn't depend on who we were, what was our background, academic qualifications or none, and so forth, whether male or female, successful or unsuccessful. It was there. Grace, simply a gift given in the gospel terms for no merited service, no promise of repayment, no expectation of any substance. And when we speak of it in religious terms, in the Christian understanding, we're usually referring to the gifts of salvation He, God, gives us in Jesus. That we can do nothing to earn our salvation. We cannot repay the debt after receiving the gift, so it's truly grace. An undeserved gift. It's just there. I think I've used this illustration so many times, you've probably heard this, but I've always been very, very affected by this in terms of grace. That when I got to a particular age, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16, a big day came. This is for older people who know what I'm talking about, maybe. My mother gave me a national savings book. Gave me a national savings book. There was a moment like when you were a boy in those days, when you wore shorts, you suddenly had long trousers, you waited for that big day when you become a man and wear long trousers. The day you didn't want to come was when you used the razor and you kept, the blood used to flow, but that meant you were a man. You went to school. I'm now shaving, wearing long trousers. But my mother gave me this national savings book. Just gave it to me. And when I opened the National Savings Book, inside, down the page, and the next page, and the next, and the next was money. Money was very tight. We're talking about, dare I declare, well, where shall I go with it? We're talking about late 40s, 50s. Woo! The days before even Elvis Presley. My mother had put in little bits of money. Money was scarce. Money was scarce. Rationing did not end in this country to 1954. That's now 60 years ago, amazingly. But money was tight. But she had put... And there was the day when she trusted me with this National Savings Book. It was suddenly mine to go and, if I wanted to draw some money out. She wasn't expecting anything in return for that gift. That was her grace. That was her love, like God so loves us. She gave it to me, not expecting anything in return. She might have hoped that I might turn out to be all right, as it were, not to go off the rails, whatever the case may be. The trust a mother has that somehow things are going to work out, but she obviously trusted that I was going to use this money that she had so saved and put into the book. Month after month. Wasn't a great deal of money, though in those days perhaps it was. That to me was an illustration of grace, in a sense, at that particular moment. You know, so much of our life when we give something to somebody, we do expect something back. You know, often, maybe you don't, of course, maybe you don't belong to the brigade of people who look at your Christmas presents, as I think some people do, and think that isn't much, is it? They didn't spend much on us this year, Ted, or Elsie, or whatever, you know. My mother used to belong to a group of people, and they always lunched every Thursday in Penzance. And about 6, 7 of them, I said to my mother, I'm sure that's what you gave 5 years ago to somebody else. It would come around in a kind of circle. But no, true love, true giving, true generosity. At the heart of the Father, in terms of his love for us, in the sense of the man who ran the vineyard, his love was to see that everybody was catered for, that everybody had enough. And he wasn't necessarily expecting that perhaps he would know that there were those who griped and those who complained, that they got the same as people who came in late in the day. What the Heavenly Father is saying, or Jesus is saying in this story, that all those people are lined up had need. They all needed work. They all needed money. Human beings need bread, the bread of life. Human beings need sustenance. They were called, some of them different parts of the day, as the need arose for work to be done. But there was that agreement in the first place. They had no right to complain because they had agreed. It didn't really matter what came next. They ought to have been joyful and happy that others received, that others also received enough money so that they themselves could live. Now, labor relations don't work that way, do they? That's not the way it works. You expect to be paid less because that's the way it is. But the story, surely the story here of Jesus, is not a laying down a practical way in which you should run your business. If you decide to do it that way, terrific. But the greater point, and the points Jesus is always making through his stories, and through all the stories of recent weeks, is the abundance and the generosity and the grace that is given to us in our lives by God, that are just there. They just happen to be. They haven't been bought. They haven't been paid for. God has provided, which is why we sing that hymn, Great is Thy Faithfulness, and so forth and so on. So that's how I see this story. If you want the more classical version, stay at 11 o'clock. And you can hear it in more refined, perhaps, more refined manner. So let's have a word of prayer. God our Father, Let us be so overwhelmed by your love that you loved us first before we loved you. That we as humans respond to your love. As Christians, we respond to that grace that you have shown to us, given to the world in Jesus. That throughout this world today, sometimes in very difficult situations and places, Christians in northern Iraq and others, where even to say the word Jesus is Lord, or the sentence is tantamount perhaps to a death sentence if heard by the wrong people, that your family is worshipping to praise you even in the most difficult situations of your goodness of life. The life that you have given to each of us in various ways, in various kinds. We give you thanks, Lord. Amen. But one final thing, Paul, when he talks of people receiving the grace of God, where does he go from there? He says, you, as the followers of Jesus, should and ought to be sharing that grace with other people. Grace in your life, in your dealings, in your meeting and working and being for and being beside, whether it involves paying somebody some money to do something or whether it doesn't. Paul talks of grace as the Christian community, as the caring, loving community that supports, that understands, that walks with, and is beside. And so Jesus, of course, did talk about thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The first commandment, though, is thou shalt love God, and then your neighbor.